Don't forget to subscribe!
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the second to last part of the Grand Championship chapter. And for today, we'll be going over the dawn of the duel, the memories of the pharaohs, and this story will be heartwarming, and it's actually kind of interesting, in fact, because it's 20 episodes long. So, without further ado, let us begin. Bakura tries to escape the returning spirit of the Millennium Ring. Yami Bakura, who tells them that they still had to attain all the 7 Millennium items at the moment. They only have one, the Millennium Eye. When Bakura refuses to help, Yami Bakura forcibly takes over his mind and body. This is the start of the tomb of the Nameless Pharaoh. Yugi's grandfather tells him the story of how he entered the tomb of the Nameless Pharaoh and discovered the Millennium Puzzle. Yugi prepares his trip to Egypt in order to restore the Pharaoh's memories. The two idiots, Rex and Weevil, return and steal Yugi's bag containing the Egyptian god cards and the Millennium items. However, their plans are thwarted when Yami Bakura shows up and reclaims the Millennium Ring. Then he uses it to send both of their souls to the Shadow Realm, to never be seen again. When Yugi shows up and asks if he was Bakura, Yami Bakura states he was not. Spiritual awakening. Yami Bakura returns Yugi's belongings, minus the Millennium Ring, as he states he still needs it until Yugi obtains all 7 of the Millennium items. Then he tries to persuade Yugi to help, using a combination of both facts and lies. However, Yugi refuses to trust him. Yami Bakura tells the Pharaoh that the only way to regain his memory is to play a game, the ultimate shadow game, before departing. Then Yami Bakura kidnaps Mokuba and sends his soul to the Shadow Realm, which forces Kaiba to duel him. Yami Bakura turns the duel into a shadow game, and tells Kaiba that if he wins, then he will return Mokuba's soul. Planning to claim the great power of the Blue Eyes White Dragon as his own, and to have Kaiba join the ultimate shadow game, Bakura attacks using a new deck of Egyptian-themed cards, including his tablet track cards, and his spirit beast, Diabound Colonel. Diabound is able to absorb half of the power of Blue Eyes as each time it activates its ability, even as Kaiba manages to fight back. However, as the sun rises, Bakura abandons the duel, stating that he has other business to attend to. However, he leaves a parting gift for Kaiba, the Millennium Eye, and tells him to come to Egypt if he wants to learn about his ancient past. As Yugi was about to board a flight to Cairo, Egypt, he meets with Taya, Joey, and Tristan. They refuse to let him leave on his own. Memoirs of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh, Yugi, Taya, Joey, and Tristan arrive in Egypt and meet up with Merrick. The Pharaoh presents the Egypt god cards to his stone tablet, and his spirit is sent 5,000 years into the past, when he was still alive and reigned as the king of Egypt. Even as Yami Bakura uses his connection to the Pharaoh's Millennium Puzzle to hitch a ride back into the past, intending to finish the battle he started then. Yami Bakura's departure into the past causes the spirits of Rex Raptor, Weevil Underwood, and Mokuba to be released from the Shadow Realm, not shown on screen. Later, Yami Bakura now completely takes over the body of his ancient alter ego, Bakura the Thief King, and frees him from the guards. Soon, his minions arrive and free him from the chains. Then, Thief King Bakura, now under the control of Yami Bakura, raids the previous pharaoh's tomb and heads off to the royal palace to claim the 7 Millennium items. The intruder. Thief King Bakura arrives at the palace to claim the Millennium items for himself. The priests engage him in battle, but Bakura, the Thief King's spirit beast, Diabound, proves too much for them to handle, until the pharaoh steps in and summons Obelisk the Tormentor. However, Obelisk happens to be evenly matched with Bakura's Diabound, which is enhanced with power that it stole from Kaiba's Blue Eyes White Dragon. During Yami Bakura's previous duel with Seto Kaiba, Meanwhile, the spirits of Yugi and the others entered the Millennium Puzzle, thanks to the help of Shady and his Millennium Key, in search of a doorway inside the Pharaoh's memories, which would take them to the memory world that the Pharaoh had entered. And, on the other hand, Bakura's Diabound fights against the Pharaoh's obelisk. Their power was equal, and Bakura is forced to retreat. Mana, a magician and also a childhood friend of the Pharaoh's, arrives to visit the palace. Mahad decides to help protect the former Pharaoh's tomb, despite the priest Isis' visions of his fate. Mahad's men take on Bakura's minions, while Mahad is trapped with bandit Bakura. In Makings of a Magician, Mahad unlocks his full power of using the Millennium Ring, and forces Bakura, the Thief King, to face him by trapping them both inside the academy where magicians used to be trained inside of a cavern. Mahad draws upon his Millennium Ring to completely unearth his full powers, which he had sealed away from the academy for his own safety. Mahad's illusion magician faces off against Bakura's Diabound, which has grown in strength since his battle with the Pharaoh. However, Mahad's illusion magician has also grown in strength since then, but Bakura's Diabound is still the strongest monster on the field. Diabound also gains the upper hand, and Thief King Bakura finishes the job by deliberately setting off the tomb's traps. To free himself, Mahad fuses his soul with the spirit beast, the illusion magician, transforming himself into Dark Magician, which made him much more powerful than Bakura's Diabound, much to Bakura's disbelief and disappointment. Bakura the Thief takes the Millennium Ring. However, Mahad as Dark Magician is able to destroy Bakura's Diabound, which causes the cavern to collapse. Thief King Bakura barely manages to escape, while Mahad's soul is sealed into the stone tablet meant for Diabound. In The Birth of Blue Eyes, Mana is distraught at the loss of her master. Priest Isis explains that he has become the Dark Magician and will eventually return with even greater powers and spells than ever before. Priest Seto and Shada head out into the city to search for people with strong spirit beasts. Seto meets a white-haired, blue-eyed young girl named Kisara, who is shunned by the citizens. Meanwhile, Shady guides Yugi and the others to a doorway into the memory world of the Pharaoh's past, and begins searching for the Pharaoh. In the village of Lost Souls, Thief King Bakura breaks into the palace again and attacks priest Akhenaten, infusing part of his evil soul into the Millennium Eye. The Pharaoh summons Slifer the Sky Dragon to chase after Bakura and Diabound. When Bakura begins targeting the villagers, Slifer is forced to take Diabound's attacks in order to defend the helpless people. The wounded Akhenaten thinks about the creation of the Millennium items through the destruction of Kal El-Na, and how he was forced to abandon his wife and his own son, Seto. In A Reversal of Fortune, Priest Seto and Karin arrive to defend the Pharaoh. Thief King Bakura pretends to retreat and leads them into a trap, giving him the chance to finally defeat Slifer. Yugi and the others appear just in time, giving the Pharaoh the strength he needs to summon the Winged Dragon of Ra. However, Yami Bakura uses Zorg's immense dark power to turn back time, so he can make sure Yugi never shows up. The Pharaoh is defeated and Thief King Bakura takes the Millennium Puzzle, while the Pharaoh falls into the chasm. In Search of a King has Akhenaten forcing Kisara to fight the other prisoners in an attempt to force her to call forth her spirit beast. Despite Akhenaten urging him not to, Seto steps in to protect Kisara until she is finally able to summon the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Meanwhile, Yugi and the gang search for the Pharaoh, who they firmly believe is still alive, and during their search they run into Mana, who decides to help them. They find the Pharaoh taking shelter in a cave, even though he's badly injured. In the Village of Vengeance, the priests meet up with the Pharaoh and the others, and together they track Thief King Bakura to Kal El-Na, a ruined village haunted by the vengeful spirits of its former citizens. The Pharaoh heads in to face Bakura alone, but is soon joined Bakura alone but is soon joined by the spirit of Mahat in the form of Dark Magician. Bakura summons Diabond, newly evolved after its battle with Slifer, to combat him. Mana finally unlocks the great magical power of her spirit base, the Dark Magician Girl, and rushes to their aid. Mahat and Mana mount a counterattack on Diabound, but it absorbs the dead spirits of Kal El Na to make itself more powerful. Seto and the rest of the priests arrive, but are unable to penetrate Diabound's spirit shield. Bakura takes the Millennium Scale from Karim and uses it to strengthen Diabound by fusing another shadow creature, Illusu, with it. Shadow locates Diabound's stone tablet and plans to destroy it to eliminate the beast. However, Akhenaten attacks him and takes the Millennium Key. Shadow is dragged into Diabound's tablet by the spirits of Kal El Na. Diabound's attacks overwhelm the Pharaoh and his guardians. As Diabound defeats them, the Pharaoh tries to surrender himself to the souls of Kal El Na. The angry spirits enter his body, planning to drag him into the Shadow Realm. But the Pharaoh's father, King Akhenaten, arrives and intercepts with the spirits, convincing them to take his soul instead. Akhenaten is able to trap the angry spirits with him, which releases Shadow from Diabound's tablet, and leads the spirits to the Shadow Realm, trapping himself there as well. Bakura becomes enraged as a loss of the spirits weakens Diabound. Mahat is finally able to defeat Diabound with the help from the Pharaoh. As Shadow watches, Diabound's tablet breaks into thousands of pieces. So Yugi and the others enter the palace to search for clues about the Pharaoh's real name. Thief King Bakura collapses, but manages to place his 3 Millennium items into the Millennium Stone. Yami Bakura then realizes Thief King Bakura from his control. He was confused about what is happening, unable to recall what he was doing. Then he turns into dust, even as he cries out in anguish for help. Yami Bakura's disembodied spirit tells the others that he was merely using Bandit Bakura as a pawn. Later, Akhenaten betrays the other priests by using a time-freezing spell to incapacitate them and takes the Millennium items, giving him the power needed to resurrect Zork, Necrophades, Dark One, and the Lord of Terror, Evil and Darkness from the Millennium Stone. Zork transforms Akhenaten into Lord of Darkness, the Great Shadow Magus, which doubles Akhenaten's power. Yami Bakura reveals the true nature of the Shadow game. It is simply a board game, played by present-day versions of Yami Bakura and the Pharaoh, the other parts of their souls. However, their actions eventually dictate the events of the memory world, which are manipulated by their game pieces. So Kaiba arrives in Egypt. Ishizu and Merrick led him to the stone tablet shrine, where the Millennium Eye begins glowing and shows visions of Bakura and the Pharaoh's shadow game. Yami Bakura pulls Kaiba its soul into the game, and uses it to help resurrect the Thief King. And Yami Bakura retakes control of Thief King Bakura. Meanwhile, Bobasa guides Yugi and the others to the Valley of Kings, where Pharaoh's true name relies in his future tomb. Then Bobasa leaves, having fulfilled his duty. With all 7 Millennium items, Thief King Bakura was able to revive Diabound without his tablet and is stronger than ever in his 5th and final form. The Millennium Stone then sinks into the ground, along with the 7 items. Bandit Bakura uses Diabound to allow Akhenaten to escape, who takes Priest Seto with him, to give Zork Necrophades enough time to be fully reborn. He separates the Pharaoh and his priests from one another and attacks them with an army of monsters while they are isolated. Karim sacrifices himself in order to give his remaining power to Shadow. Meanwhile, Pharaoh heads back to the palace to find Priest Seto. The name of the game. Seto and Kisara face Akhenaten. However, Kisara is held while protecting Seto, and the White Dragon is sealed in stone. Meanwhile, Yugi and his friends brave many deadly traps and finally find the Pharaoh's true name in the room in the back. The Pharaoh makes it back to the palace. However, he is forced to battle against Seto as his mind was being manipulated by the evil priest Akhenaten. The legendary ancient match between the Pharaoh and Priest Seto begins. The Pharaoh summons Mahad as Dark Magician to fight against the Blue Eyes White Dragon, now controlled by Priest Seto. The Pharaoh is eventually overpowered. However, the spirit of Kisara, in the form of Blue Eyes White Dragon, enters Seto's mind and destroys Akhenaten for good. As a result, Akhenaten's soul is sent to the Shadow Realm. However, the time on Yami Bakura's third hourglass runs out, and Zork Necrophage begins to revive. At the same time, Yami Bakura takes full control of Tristan's body and blocks the only exit of the Pharaoh's tomb, telling Yugi that he will never leave the tomb alive. Yami Bakura then challenges Yugi to a duel. The Dark One comes. Thief Kame Bakura succeeds in reviving Zork Necrophage, sacrificing himself and is diabound in the process. The two absorb the Millennium Stone. As Zork emerges from underneath Kol Elna, and his energy destroys the Millennium Stone, causing the Millennium items to scatter throughout Kol Elna. The Pharaoh and Priest Seto ride back to the palace in an attempt to stop Zork. Shada intercepts a lightning bolt sent by Zork, meant for the Pharaoh, and dies. Meanwhile, events in the memory world have linked to the real world. Zork's revival causes the real world to be beset by all sorts of natural disasters. Once Yami Bakura gains the Pharaoh's name, he intends to revive Zork in the real world. Meanwhile, Yugi and Yami Bakura possessing the body of Tristan duel. If Yugi wins, he can leave and tell the Pharaoh his true name. And if he loses, he'll never leave. He and his friends will be swallowed by the Shadow Realm. So Isis and Mana head for Kol Elna to retrieve the Millennium items, and Isis uses her Millennium necklace to strengthen her winged guardian of the fortress to distract Zork. However, Zork destroys Isis' own weapon, and the amount of damage she takes kills her. Once Mana delivers the Millennium items to Shimon, he summons Exodia with a Millennium Key, which holds its own against Zork. Zork eventually overpowers it, since Exodia drew its power from a mortal, Shimon, while Zork had an almost infinite supply of darkness. Zork the Dark One also then destroys Exodia, killing Shimon. Mana delivers the other Millennium items to the Pharaoh, who proceeds to fight Zork. The duel between Yugi and Yami Bakura continues, but suddenly, Yami Bakura's voice changes and he calls Yugi a pathetic mortal, which strikes Taya as strange. And the Pharaoh summons the 3 Egyptian gods to combat Zork. At the tabletop in the Shadow Realm, Yami Bakura claims he'll soon return to his original form and leaves the table to join with his 5,000-year-old counterpart Zork. At the same time, he sends the present-day Pharaoh to the battlefield to reunite with his past self. Meanwhile, Zork defeats the 3 Egyptian gods by covering the sun, the source of their strength. Zork then turns the Egyptian gods into motionless statues of stone. Yami Bakura's destruction strategy drives Yugi into a corner, but remembering the Pharaoh, Joey, and Taya are counting on him, he continues the duel and draws the one card that can turn the tables. Mana takes the Pharaoh back to the palace while Seto summons Blue Eyes White Dragon to combat Zork. Blue Eyes White Dragon stops the solar eclipse but is defeated by Zork, which turns Priest Seto and the Millennium Rod to stone. Kaiba then takes over and summons Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, which is equal to the power of Zork. The explosive burst of energy, their clashing attacks opens a rift from the memory world to the real world. Meanwhile, Yugi successfully defeats Yami Bakura with the final card in his deck. Yugi and his friends fly to the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh becomes Blackluster Soldier and fuses with Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, becoming Master of Dragon Knight. However, the Master of Dragon Knight is destroyed by its own attack during the battle, and the Pharaoh is seemingly defeated.
And finally, in the name of the Pharaoh, Yugi, Joey, and the others summon monsters to help the Pharaoh. The ancient characters of his name cannot be read, so they cannot tell the Pharaoh what it is. Taya remembers the cartouche pendant, and the group focus on it, causing the characters they saw to materialize on the surface. The Pharaoh reads it, regaining his true name, Adam. Imbued with this power, he revives the 3 Egyptian gods and fuses them together to form the creator of light, Horakhthi. Horakhthi is a level 12 warrior divine god attribute monster. With infinite attack and defense points, if successfully summoned during a duel, it results in instant win. The Pharaoh attacks Zord directly from Horakhti's shining light, which results in Zord being destroyed forever. Later, the Pharaoh entrusts the Millennium items to the revived priest Seto and makes him the next Pharaoh of Egypt. With his world passed over, Adam's body dissolves even as priest Seto promises to rule Egypt justly. Adam and his friends then leave the memory world.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
YuGiOh will return right after this.